Time will tell if the Cleveland Browns made the right call in the 2025 NFL draft in trading out from number 2 to number 5, ultimately selecting Mason Graham and adding draft picks in 25, and most importantly, a second first round pick in 2026. We'll talk about that and more, a little bit more in depth. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. All of us here at the OBR appreciate all the support from our loyal group of Browns fans who come out every day for their favorite Cleveland Browns coverage, whether it's the written content of our fantastic group of writers, or, of course, the OBR streaming network beginning every night at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and Twitch. Make sure you are subscribed at both places for the OBR streaming network. Looking back at it now, it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch how Mason Graham ultimately develops, performs, and just exactly what kind of impact a player like Mason Graham gives the Cleveland Browns, certainly in 2025 and going further. We know the way this works, Browns fans. People react either positively or negatively to any move Andrew Berry makes in the very beginning. They give themselves the opportunity to change their tune in the middle. Then after that, they give themselves the opportunity to change their tune yet again. I, as everyone knows, was a huge supporter of the possibility of drafting of Abdul. I can understand the reasoning the Cleveland Browns chose to go the way they did. If you were the Travis Hunter side of keeping the number 2 selection and making a pick, you certainly will be ones who are going to monitor what Mr. Hunter does down in Jacksonville versus what Mason Graham does for the Cleveland Browns, and maybe have or not have your way with how the Cleveland Browns handled what they did in the beginning of the 2025 NFL draft. Now, Graham will be entrenched as a day one starter for the Cleveland Browns on the interior. And no, it is not the sexy thing. It's not going to give everybody the oohs and ahs. But the Browns desperately needed some interior help on the defensive line due to their inabilities to stop the running game in 2024. They were just abused. There's no easy way to put it. Teams had zero respect for their ability to defend the run and just put it on Cleveland. Not to say that the defense was performing well in both aspects, because that is certainly not true. But a Jim Schwartz defense and the defensive scheme employed by Jim Schwartz is certainly catered and certainly built upon the ability to shut down the run, play man coverage, and make the opposing quarterback's life miserable, and putting him in a state of chaos where they try to make it almost damn near impossible to succeed. Graham's ability against the run was certainly a huge part of the success of the Michigan Wolverines in 24, and certainly ultimately the national championship they won in 2023. Kid with a great motor, great respect for the game, respect for the work ethic and the dedication it takes to be successful in the game of football. When you watch his training videos or you watch his one-on-one work in practice, you see his hand usage, you see his ability to create separation from those in front of him, to be a great penetrator within the backfield, squatty in size, quick, powerful first and second step. The thing for Graham, which is going to be how he is going to be judged ultimately, is going to be, can Mason Graham become that overall impactful player from the interior? Which will mean, of course, how well does he perform in pass rushing situations? How quickly are the Cleveland Browns going to necessarily trust him to be a guy that takes on a large snap count, which will give him the opportunity to hopefully be an extremely effective piece for the Cleveland Browns in shutting down the run game and being able to contribute within the pass rush as well. If Graham can quickly become a player that can be successful in both aspects, it's going to look extremely impressive for what Cleveland pulled off in this trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville obviously enamored with Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter was on record in the fall with a podcast with Shedeur Sanders talking about, his early days of fandom of the Jaguars growing up in the area, kind of how he felt that they were kind of his team. I think, and it's probably unfair that these players will kind of be judged against each other, because one being a wide receiver, the other one, of course, being a defensive tackle. Well, people are going to do it regardless. And I think what we kind of learned, and we, of course, never got to see Cleveland Browns general manager Andrew Berry in a position where he was drafting this high, is value, positional value. Now, look, we touched on it as early as January when I joined here at the OBR, and certainly discussed it at length and in depth for the entire pre-draft lead up until April. And for me, the ideal situation, and we all know this, the ideal situation would have been that there was a quarterback that warranted being drafted number 2 overall, and it would have easily covered up how terrible the 2024 season was if the Cleveland Browns were just able to get their franchise quarterback at number 2 overall and just proceed to roll on. It became apparent probably, I would say, right after the combine that Shedeur Sanders was never going to be drafted that high. Of course, it never felt like Shedeur Sanders was going to be drafted when he was in the 5th round as well. So then everybody kind of either shifted to Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. I think the Browns, knowing that they did not have the quarterback in place yet, and obviously at the time having no way of knowing that they were going to get an opportunity mid-day 3 to go ahead and select Shedeur Sanders, they just felt without having the quarterback in place, adding Travis Hunter was not going to improve the offense overall. Quarterback first, usually then weapons, right? I remember referencing in all those draft lead-ups about, the way it was built for Joe Burrow, where they drafted Burrow, came back around later in the same draft, drafted T. Higgins, and then the next year were able to get Jamar Chase, and that offense was set and that offense was rolling, obviously. For Graham, if he does what everybody kind of thinks is, reaches the top level of what Mason Graham can probably do, it'll alleviate what was really a huge issue. It has been an issue for the Cleveland Browns, certainly since I've been covering this team since 2017. There really was just never that interior presence at the young age that you just felt, hey, here's a guy that's going to be an answer for this question, for this problem, for an extended period of time. And certainly, if the Deshaun Watson trade could have been undone, maybe there would have been instances where the Cleveland Browns would have chose to, you know, get that guy, get him early. But now they were finally able to get it done in 2025. Of course, this was after the 2024 draft where you selected Mike Hall out of Ohio State in round 2, and then came back late on day 3 and added Jawan Briggs. And now you kind of get to look at this room and figure that you have, you know, a kind of a future nucleus in that room for a few years of Graham, Hall, and of course, Jawan Briggs, who played pretty well once the Cleveland Browns came to their senses and decided to activate him and play him regularly. You know, Dalvin Tomlinson was a nice player to have here. It just didn't feel like it was going to be a long run as Dalvin was already a very established veteran. Shelby Harris, still here wouldn't stun me if at some point Shelby Harris was not a member of this Browns defensive line somewhere in 2025 for either good reasons or bad reasons. Good reasons, Graham, Hall, Briggs all play so well early in 2025 that maybe there's not a lot of run for a veteran like Shelby Harris. So you kind of maybe go the route you just did with Ogbo Okoronkwo and maybe, let the player know that, hey, we're going to let you go somewhere else because there's just not a lot of opportunity for reps here for you. With now having a future nucleus in place, unlike a couple of years ago where Tomlinson was needed, of course, Maurice Hurst was needed, and of course, Shelby Harris as well. But Graham and Hunter will be linked. And Graham right now certainly, comes in as the rookie first round pick. And of course, going to get the media darling coverage, which he should. But if Travis Hunter, starts doing some really, really good things down in Jacksonville, I think people who cover this team, people who are fans of this team, may turn this into a spot where it's going to be difficult for Mason Graham to measure up because I just think people just don't know accurately how to equate defensive line play, especially interior defensive line play, and the success that it can or cannot have for an NFL team. Now, you want to say what would be like ideal for Mason Graham? Ideally for Mason Graham, he becomes a highly productive volume player who certainly, becomes a pest and becomes disruptive as far as, his penetration and his run game ability. But what then becomes the cherry on top is, Mason Graham finding a way to certainly contribute more as a pass rusher. If you could maybe say a sweet spot of, maybe 5 to 8 sacks per season, combine that with being an effective and disruptive guy in run defense and run support, of course, then all of a sudden you're talking like a really, really solid player. And the advantage, of course, that Mason Graham is going to have here that when years go back and people try to evaluate the trading of 2 to 5 and the Travis Hunter as opposed to Mason Graham, certain conversations will be that it's not going to be just Mason Graham versus Travis Hunter. Of course, that trade also involved Quinshon Judkins. That trade is also going to involve whatever player ultimately becomes the 2026 first round pick, which heck, hey, the Browns could maybe even trade down from that pick at another, saying it could get very jacked off and out of hand, of course. But if, the Browns, and for right now, you would think all intents and purposes are that the Cleveland Browns, with these 2 first round selections in 2026, are going to draft obviously a quarterback and then what would be best player available. Certainly could be an offensive lineman. Case could be made that it could be a wide receiver, cornerback, perhaps even another pass rusher. So then it's Mason Graham, the quarterback, and Quinshon Judkins were traded for Travis Hunter. I don't see a way that ultimately the Cleveland Browns can lose this trade. Things would have to go catastrophically bad. And, Hunter, with obviously all the fare and the fanfare and the bells and whistles that go around his game and his, ability to play on both sides of the ball. And it'll be fascinating to see just exactly how Jacksonville handles it. And Mason Graham, who just seems, for most intents and purposes, this quiet, do your job type of young man. And I think that's what's going to kind of excite me as far as what Mason Graham can do. And, there will be a ton of opportunities, certainly for Mason Graham. There will be one-on-ones. That's the joy of playing with the best edge rusher in the NFL and Myles Garrett as the rookie defensive tackle, even though you were drafted number 5 overall. There's not going to be a team in obvious past situations that are going to say, well, we better double team the rookie, and we think our tackle can handle Myles Garrett all day long, one-on-one. We all know that's not fact, right? So this is a really, really, in my opinion, great opportunity for Mason Graham. Because he's kind of the thirst quencher for people like me and many other fans of the Browns, and maybe many others who just, kind of maybe have a little bit of an older school thinking of the game of football and just, value trench play. You know, the skill and the passing game and all of that stuff, it's fantastic. But, without your O-line winning versus the defensive, there's just so much more that goes into it to make sure that all of that is successful. Graham is going to be a really, really fun player to watch and evaluate here. And, certainly I'm not, just pegging him for success. We've had many discussions over the years, certainly in my time here and certainly at my old home, of, just how difficult it is to come into the NFL as a young player on the defensive line and go against these guys on the interior. Interior pass blockers are very savvy. They know what they can and cannot get away with. They know, of course, just how important the initial contact is in pass pro, because if you get beat off the snap playing on the interior, 9 times out of 10, your play is dead, because if he beats you on his first step, the interior pass rusher only needs 2 more before he is getting to your quarterback. I think Graham is wired with the right personality, work ethic, talent, skill set, that the transition should go pretty smooth for him. So for him to meet what are the expectations for his abilities, I think he gets there, and I think he gets there pretty quickly. And then maybe we have this couple of season nucleus of players on the interior that I have never seen this franchise have in the 9 years now that I have been covering them. The Browns' ultimate success or lack thereof in 2025 is probably not going to be about what the star players do. It's probably not going to be about what a Miles Garrett does, certainly in 2025. It's not going to be about what a Jerry Judy does. It's not going to be about what a Denzel Ward does. It's possible that when I mention Miles Garrett, that Isaiah McGuire could very possibly have a bigger impact in a positive way for the Cleveland Browns in 2025 than what Miles does. I mean, we've seen Miles just be an absolute terror since 2017 for this Cleveland Browns defense. And as we all know, more often than not, didn't mean a hill of beans. So it's more about getting other players to step up, like an Isaiah McGuire, because I think we all kind of just know what you're going to get from Miles each and every year. And McGuire, to his credit, in 23, was really just a guy that just, made the roster, but there wasn't much opportunity for him. As we know, the way the season worked out in 23, all of a sudden now there was more opportunity for Isaiah McGuire and certainly got his feet wet. And then, of course, in 2024, nearing the trade deadline, the Browns did the smart and correct thing and traded Zadarius Smith over to the Detroit Lions, which opened up obviously a huge opportunity for Isaiah McGuire to get the reps he needed, I should say. So we can kind of get more of an idea of, well, what do I think I can do in this league and what do I think I still need to work on? His run game, his run defense is honestly probably surpassed what the hope would be. We're talking about a guy that was drafted on day 3, early day 3, of course, that, graded out over 85%, and I do believe is one of the top 5 graded run defenders in 2024 as far as defensive ends are concerned. Every little clip and video we see where Isaiah McGuire, whether it's with Andrew Siciliano or another member of the Cleveland media, I look at the way McGuire just physically looks, and I keep in mind that, McGuire at the combine was weighing at about 268 pounds. I believe that was his official weight during his time at the combine. And I see McGuire now. And I'm of the belief that Isaiah McGuire probably isn't near 268 anymore. My guess would be maybe he's 5 to 10 pounds lighter than his original combine weight. Just looks better. And my belief certainly would be, probably through diet and weight work and obviously conditioning and all these other things that, McGuire certainly, who didn't test like an elite athlete, is trying to do everything within his power, within his body to increase athleticism. And, when I say with Graham that 5 to 8 sack total number would be great for him. I think, somewhere in that range obviously would be the ideal number for Isaiah McGuire. If you can get Isaiah McGuire to get to that type of sack total number with the ability he has as a run defender, all of a sudden you probably have an absolute dream running mate to pair with Myles Garrett. Certainly, Mike Hall and Jawan Briggs fit into this as well as far as, players who may not be huge names, but could be very important. And all of a sudden, the Cleveland Browns may be having some more success in 2025 than anybody anticipated. I'd say it's fair probably to throw Emerson and Newsome in there as well, just because you had some pretty big impact from Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome in 2023. You did not necessarily have that same impact from either player in 2024. And it's certainly believable that both players have a better showing in 2024 than they did in 2023. It's hard to get, fall back much more, right? But also it's, with that free agency coming at the end of 2025 for both of these players, you got to believe they are doing everything within their power to put together the best version of themselves. I think this also equates, certainly to the offensive line. I mean, the offense as well. The expectation for Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. It's very difficult to put into terms of numbers. But I mean, looking at the production of both those young players, what one did as the offensive player of the year in the SEC last year, what the other did as part of a national championship team in Columbus. It's hard to believe that, Judkins and Sampson are not here to give you some legitimate impact. You think there's going to be more production in 2025 than there was in 2024 for David Njoku? And not that David isn't a name on this team right now, but, what he was able to do in 23 as opposed to 24, I think 23 is more the reality of the type of player that David Njoku is. I think he's a guy that certainly will be more successful here. And if it's Joe Flacco to start, we know that story. We've already seen parts and chapters of the Joe Flacco, David Njoku book. Flacco really excelled with Njoku, and Njoku the same way. Amari Cooper missed that clinching Thursday night game against the New York Jets in 2023. Everybody knew the ball was going to David Njoku that night, and there was nothing New York Jets could do about it. David Njoku ran amok against him that night. God, that was a fun night as a Browns fan, right? The offensive line, and, certainly, all could certainly put together better seasons in 25 than they had in 24. And I'm talking about every one of them. Dewan, Joel, Posick, Teller, Conklin. So much of this is going to have to do as far as what the Browns can truly be in 2025. It's going to have to come down to the quarterback position. I certainly don't want to sound like Groundhog Day as we say this here on kind of each and every episode. But I mean, you can break down this Cleveland Browns team and the possibilities for 2025. And you could either talk yourself into or certainly talk yourself out of things. But it always comes down to quarterback play. And certainly in the AFC, it comes down to quarterback play. I mean, God, you look at Denver. Just look at Denver. I mean, I'm sorry, not look at Denver. Look at the AFC West. Mahomes, Knicks, Herbert, Geno Smith. Geno Smith is maybe the fourth best quarterback in that division. And Geno Smith's a pretty darn good quarterback. You got Burrow and Jackson in your own division. You got Josh Allen and Drake May in the East. CJ Stroud in Houston. Cam Ward probably kicking up the rear sometime soon. There are so many questions about the Cleveland Browns and so many things that could turn out to be positive answers. And it may not matter because it's all going to come down to who it is behind center and just exactly how he performs for this team. We appreciate everybody comes out here to the OBR every day for your favorite Cleveland Browns coverage. Our fabulous group of writers put out some fantastic written content for you guys to all absorb every day. Then we come out here and pound out every night on the OBR streaming network. Give you guys some great, great chatter. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR streaming network on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR streaming network over on Twitch. We appreciate you all so much. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. And we will talk to y'all tomorrow.